Welcome back to the TwinSpires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hansen, and today we'll be talking Pool 1 of the Kentucky Derby Future Wager, first crop sire rankings, and we'll wrap up with some Eclipse Awards talk. And James, now that the Breeders' Cup is over, it's time to focus on the road to the Kentucky Derby, and Pool 1 closed just before the Breeders' Cup. What were your initial thoughts on Pool 1?
Yeah, this was the second year we had the Pool 1 on the Tuesday, Thursday of Breeders' Cup week. I think, looking at it after the Breeders' Cup weekend, then definitely take a look back at the prices on Fierceness and Locked and some other runners from that race. But I did want to mention a trio of sharp last out maiden winners for Brad Cox that I believe if you have a ticket on right now, you're pretty excited for the months to come. First off, Air of Defiance. He got bet down to 33-1. He got some support, but I think he's a real promising son of Quality Road. He, after running in his running second to Fierceness first time out at Saratoga, he broke his maiden by 6 lengths at Keeneland, got a 95 Brisnet speed rating. Nash was still a maiden off of a runner-up finish to a good-looking winner called Booth at 6 furlongs. People that purchased a win ticket on him in Pool 1 got 68-1, and he came back last week and broke his maiden over a mile and 16th at Churchill Downs by more than 10 lengths, got a big number as well. He's a son of Medaglia de Oro. All three of these colts are bred for 2 turns in the Derby distance, in my belief. The third one, Rocketeer, his supporters got 58-1. He's the son of Curl, and he won at first asking at Keeneland, going about 7 furlongs by open lengths, and another real promising prospect for Brad Cox. Vance, what were your thoughts on Pool 1 of the Future Wager?
Well, as mentioned, it did close before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and I guess it was kind of interesting that Fierceness was sent off as the 4th individual choice, despite a very poor run in the Champagne Stakes. But as everybody knows, some of the juvenile participants weren't in the first pool for certain reasons that we all know. So maybe not surprising that Fierceness went off at 4-1 as the 4th individual choice. Off that impressive maiden at Saratoga, however, the Derby history in general suggests that it's generally best to look beyond the major 2-year-old stakes winners. So we had lots of other entries to choose from in the pool. But looking beyond the major stakes winners, that's also why I think the mutual field tends to be so heavily backed in these pools. And, at least for the first 3 or 4 pools every year. And of course, it was an odds-on choice after the wagering closed. Some of the off prices in Pool 1 I thought were major underlays, and I'll point out 2 of them. Seize the Gray was bet down to 37-1, and he's a son of Arrogate, and he seems fairly well exposed already after 5 starts or so this year. So 37-1 was not a good price on him. And then I thought the 3-year-old filly option went off at 61-1. That just seems a little too low to me. That it doesn't seem like a overly fast group of 2-year-old fillies off of the Breeders' Cup performance by just FYI. So those are kind of the 2 things that I kind of noticed after Pool 1. Ashley, how about you?
Well, I was going to talk about Nash as well. You already covered that, James, and I think there were 8 betting interests for Brad Cox, which he always has a lot of them in these Kentucky Derby Future Wagers. But a couple others that stood out to me, and I was curious your all's thoughts on this. Dornoch closed at 19-1. I thought that was a bit low. He's a full brother to Mage, and I'm kind of thinking that's probably why so many bettors were interested in him. He broke his maiden in his 3rd career start, had 1 1/16 of a mile, but failed to win his first 2 starts. And aside from his pedigree, I just don't really think the resume warrants a 19-1. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think he's promising. I did like the way he stretched out last time to 2 turns and won with Luis Saez at Keeneland. But yeah, in this Pool 1, 19-1 is a little bit too low to take in early first week of November. I did think Vance made a good point. He has a piece up on the TwinSpires Edge about Breeders' Cup winners in the Kentucky Derby, and they're only 2 for 39. But Vance made the point in his article that there's none of the 2-turn juvenile stakes that produce more than 2 winners of the Derby as well. So whether it's American Pharoah, the Champagne, Kentucky Jockey Club, et cetera, all of them at best are 2 for 39 over the last 39 years. So that just shows you, I believe, that a lot of Derby winners perhaps haven't won a stake at 2, at least in recent years. The majority of them haven't. Doesn't mean that fierceness or locked or fierceness, at least, or anybody that's won a stake can't do it next year. But I did find that article very interesting.
Another,
I'm sorry, my input on Dornoch is, 19 to 1. That's just not the kind of price I'm looking for in pool 1 of the Kentucky Derby Future Wager. I don't care what horse we're talking about. I'm looking for, 30, 40, 50 to 1 shot that's hasn't their best is yet to come. And that's the case with a lot of these colts in the Derby Future Wager, but 19 to 1 is just not a price I'm willing to latch on to this early in the process.
Another one that stood out to me was Agate Road. This was a horse that was 99 to 1, bet down to 49 to 1, a Todd Pletcher runner, but he's been racing on the turf in his last 3. He did break his maiden in a 1 mile maiden special weight that was taken off the turf, but then has since raced on the grass the last 3 starts. So I don't really know what Connections plan to do with him long term. So I was also surprised that his price went down after racing on the turf. Would you all take that price at 49 to 1? Vance?
No way. He'll switch back to the dirt off of that juvenile turf effort, but no way. Vance.
Yeah. He seems like a turf horse for the 3-year-old season. They may try him on dirt just to check to see how he does, but I don't suspect he'll be more than a turf performer next year.
Well, pool 2 will be November 23rd to 26th, and I think we'll see Fierceness's price drop down and a few others as well. And somewhat related to the Kentucky Derby Future Wager, each year at TwinSpires Edge, we cover first crop sires. Each of us follows one in particular. In the last 2 years, we had a first crop sire produce the eventual Kentucky Derby winner. 2 years ago, it was Keen Ice with Rich Strike, and then last year it was Good Magic with Mage. Now, Vance, you're covering Matoli this season. Are there any progeny that stand out from Matoli for you?
Well, so far it's been the fillies by Matoli that have been more prominent. One in particular is the Kenny McPeak trained BB's Dream, who dominated the Pocahontas at Churchill in September by more than 8 lengths. She was also a good second in the Debutante Stakes over the summer and in the Alcibiades at Keeneland. However, she ran below par in the Rags to Riches at Churchill after bypassing the Breeders' Cup. So BB's Dream might be more of a one-turn filly. Well, that remains to be seen. She might take another shot at 2 turns in the Goldenrod next week at Churchill. But as far as the male progeny of Matoli so far, and I think this horse's name was brought up a little earlier, so far the most dominant one that I've seen is Booth, who won by more than 5 lengths on debut at Keeneland on October 7th. And he's his connections are virtually the same as Matoli. He's trained by Steve Asmussen and co-owned by the Hellingbrats. So Booth is a up-and-coming sprinter. He's expected to run in the Ed Brown Stakes at Churchill next week for his stakes debut. He earned a 98 Bristnet speed rating at Keeneland. So I don't know if Booth is going to stretch out necessarily, although he is a half brother to Jockey Club Gold Cup winner Bright Future. So it remains to be seen what his distance limitations are. From a general viewpoint, Matoli, his offspring have had little trouble adapting to all varieties of surfaces and track conditions. He's had turf winners, dirt winners, synthetic, up to a mile 70 yards, and of course sprinters as well. So Matoli is turning into an early versatile sire. James, how about yours?
Yeah, I'm doing, and you're right about Booth. I mean, he was obviously flattered when Nash, who ran second to him, got well beaten in second, came back and won. I'm doing Flame Away. He got off to a fast start at Stud this spring into the summer, thrown a number of winners. And remains very promising. But most of his runners so far, his notable winners, are turf runners or synthetic. And I'll mention first off Dreamfire. She did win the Grade 3 Sorrento, going 6 furlongs on the dirt at Del Mar, second time out. But she came back and won the Grade 3 Surfer Girl on turf and exits an unplaced finish in the Juvenile Fillies turf. Looks like she could be heading for turf races next year. He does have Flame Away does have Freedom Principle, who's coming off back-to-back maiden and stakes wins at Gulfstream Park on synthetic. But his other notable winners, I thought so far, and they're all coming off of allowance wins. Blue Eyed George at Keeneland, Julia's Dream at Del Mar, and Wine Collector at Laurel Park are all exiting. I thought nice turf allowance wins. They could be 3-year-olds to watch moving forward on the grass next season. Flame Away stands. He's going to stand for $20,000 fee in 2024. He's one of the few young, promising U.S. sires that doesn't stand at Spendthrift Farm, Ashley.
Well, I've got one at Spendthrift, and it's Vino Rosso. He's currently the leader in progeny earnings by first crop sires in North America. And I almost mentioned the Wine Stewart in the Kentucky Derby Future Wager. He opened at 30-1 and closed at 40-1. I guess that's maybe fair, but thought he could have stayed at that same price of 30-1 because he was 3 for 3 to start his career, beaten just a half length by Locked in the Breeders' Futurity. Locked was the post-time favorite for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, of course, finished third. And we have the Wine Stewart had a 97-95 brisnet speed figure in his last two, won the Bashford Manor, the Funny Side, both at 6 furlongs. So I think we didn't get to see him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He scratched, but he was 8-1 from the rail post. And I was planning to bet him. I thought he had a chance in that race. As far as the fillies, we have Cat Classique. This was actually my best bet in the jury last week. She came out and won the Smart Halo Stakes over a Brad Cox runner, Du Bois Blanc, who was the post-time favorite. And Cat Classique is now 3 for 3 for her career for Brittany Russell. Brittany Russell said that she plans to stretch her out to 7 furlongs, probably the Gin Talking Stakes on December 30th as her potential next start. We also have a couple other runners. We have Wind Me Up, a Bob Baffert runner, who, of course, we won't see necessarily possibly on the Kentucky Derby Trail, but can't earn points unless he transfers to another barn. And then we have Dancing Groom also in the Kentucky Derby Future Wager, a distant third in the Champagne, and 7 maidens racing throughout the week, a couple at Churchill and Aqueduct. So plenty of horses on the trail for Vino Rosso this year. Well, finally, we talked about Horse of the Year last week, but there are a few Eclipse awards that maybe have some debate left, and one of them is Top Turf Female. So, James, who would get your vote? I think this might be the most contentious award in the Eclipse Awards this year.
Well, I'm going to go with Inspiral off of her victory. I thought that was a very good win in the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Turf. She defeated Warm Heart. Inspiral is a top performer overseas for John Gosden. She came to the U.S. and, like I said, I thought that was a notable win for the division because you referenced it. Once this division, as far as the U.S. performers this year, I think it's very hard to separate themselves. Some of the leading contenders, like in Italian, have lost at least 3 races in a row, multiple starts in a row. So I'm not a big fan of arbitrary rules for voting. Basically Inspiral meets the qualifications to win the Eclipse Award, and a lot of international runners have won the Eclipse Award with only 1 U.S. start. So Inspiral will be getting my vote, Vance.
Yeah, I agree. With the exception of Warlike Goddess, who wasn't a factor in the Breeders' Cup Turf, Inspiral defeated every noteworthy domestic contender for the title in the Filly and Mare Turf. In Italian, simply didn't stay the 1.25 miles. Didia and Fevrover both fared very poorly, finishing near the back of the field. And as you mentioned, there is plenty of precedent for a European one and done winning the Eclipse off of single U.S. race. And 21st century examples include Goldikova and Ouija boards. So this situation warrants the rewarding of one of Europe's top fillies of recent years. And so I'm backing Inspiral as well. Ashley?
Well, I guess this isn't so contentious after all, because I was going to go Inspiral as well. She beat Warm Heart, who I think was also in the running, beat her in the Filly and Mare Turf, and faced Group 1 or Grade 1 company all season. But I do think, Maj probably didn't face tough enough competition to start the season, but she was 4 for 5 with 1 second, which was a nose second in the Breeders' Cup Mile, which was beaten barely by Master of the Seas. Do you think she warrants votes, or do you think she didn't face tough enough competition? Because I certainly looking at her resume, 4 for 5. What do you think?
I think she warrants votes. I mean, you have to put second and third place vote getters in when you file your votes. So I think she definitely would have had a strong argument for champion turf female Maj if she had edged Modern Game or Master of the Seas. But coming up a nose short, I think she'll just be in the finalist group, and Inspiral's still going to win.
Yeah, if she had won that photo in the mile, for sure, she would have been a major contender against Inspiral. Because she didn't, the main knock against her is that she was only defeating 3-year-old filly rivals all season long, and this award will typically is an all age award, and so success against older runners, I think, is imperative.
All right, well, there you have it. I guess it's going to be Inspiral if we're predicting this correctly. So we'll see what happens when the awards come out. But that's all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. We'll be back next Tuesday. And of course, on Thursday, we have our best bets and fades of the week on the TwinSpires jury. We'll see you then.